Hey everyone, I'm Jana Stafford with BIC Magazine, and today I'm joined by Margaret Kidd, who is the Supply Chain and Logistics Technology Program Director at University of Houston. Welcome, Margaret.
Well, welcome, Jana. Thank you for hosting me today.
Yeah, of course, it's great to have you. I heard Margaret say recently in regards to what her students at U of H are learning as a living laboratory with the current container Geddon going on across the nation. Margaret is here today to give us the inside scoop on this issue and perhaps on what to expect in the future. We also want to announce that she will be moderating the upcoming Economic Alliance Houston Port Region Supply Chain Forum. The event will consist of a mostly industry audience, and the panel will be supply chain professionals. It's coming up quickly on May 12th from 3 to 5 p.m. at San Jacinto College's Maritime Training Center. So be sure to register on the events page at allianceportregion.com. Phew, okay, Margaret, we're ready to go now that we got all of that out. But before we get into too deep, can you first give us the big picture of what has been pushing the current supply chain issues that has everybody scrambling?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, Jana. And I would really say, we're kind of allegedly exiting a COVID world, but we're really still in it. And now, this is all compounded with the Russian war on Ukraine. But essentially, you're looking at a supply demand imbalance where you had US consumers spending as if they had platinum cards with no limits, right? And it really, then you factor in this periodic closure of Chinese ports and cities. And just in this last month, we saw 46 cities in China in partial lockdown. So it becomes a domino effect. With the closure of the ports and manufacturing, and then the ultimate shortages of equipment and labor, and then congestion. I think ultimately the consumer will stop spending as much as they've had over the last 2 years because they're returning to work and that disposable income is kind of dissipated.
Okay, yeah. Well, can you talk to our audience about Houston's current and future container trade business in the Port of Houston as compared to some of these other regions?
Well, a lot of exciting things are happening in Texas and in Houston. Over the last 4 years, a number of major corporations have either relocated or have established manufacturing facilities in Texas. Companies such as Tesla, Oracle, Hewlett Packard, and Enterprises, and now most recently the Samsung chip factory. So people are choosing Texas because of its geographic location, ease of doing business. And when you think about it, the Port of Houston is essentially in the middle of the country. And within 1,000 miles, over 152 million consumers can be reached. So in terms of really a comparative advantage, it's that geographic position, but also in terms of labor relations and industrial real estate cost, it's a very compelling argument for importers and exporters to choose Texas and to choose the Port of Houston. The state of Texas has been the leading exporting state in the country for over 20 years. In 2021, over $375 billion in goods were exported in our state. If you've been following the Port of Houston trade numbers as they announce them, trade was up 15% on container cargo last year, whereas nationally it was only up 8% for US ports. Clearly, folks are choosing Texas, and that's a good thing for all of us here in Houston.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a lot of interesting information about the state. I did not realize so much. Well, of course, a big buzzword now is the digital transformation, which BIC Magazine actually just held an industry roundtable on that specific subject. Margaret, where are Texas ports in this movement? And are they keeping up with the inevitable change or are they lagging?
Well, regrettably, I would approach this from a national perspective. US ports lag European and Asian ports in terms of automation and digitization. I'm hoping this new infrastructure bill will allow some pivoting towards some more modern practices. And a lot of the lessons learned during COVID really point to the importance of data sharing between ports, between shippers, between the rail, between the truckers. And I think, this is a great time to take some of these investment dollars that are coming out of the Infrastructure Act to upgrade facilities.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, I was going to ask about President Biden's infrastructure bill. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about how it affects Houston or any other industry heavy cities?
Well, I mean, obviously, Houston has benefited. If you look at Project 11, for instance, 142 million was awarded for deepening and widening as a result of this Infrastructure Act. And certainly this helps keep that billion-dollar project moving forward. Also, really wonderful news is, the 18 million that the Bayport Container Terminal expansion was awarded. So, when you consider what has happened nationally with infrastructure, there has not been investment in over 30 years. So if we want to maintain our competitiveness as a nation, we have to build out infrastructure in our ports, our rail, our highways, and broadband access.
Okay. Well, jumping to a broader topic, Margaret, I'm just kind of curious, like what are the five biggest things, say, that have been affected by the supply chain issues these past 2 years? And I mean, also why these particular items, if you know?
Yeah, well, I think from my lens, the first thing I would just address is how consumers shop. Um, you know, 2 years ago, less than 10% of total retail sales was e-commerce, and that jumped up to 17%. So that's a big movement in consumer behavior and how they interact with a retailer. Think about it. You're locked. You're on lockdown, so you're going to order online, or the restaurants aren't open. They're only open for takeout. So it really changed how we consume. That would be my first point. A second point has been the impact of inflation. We're seeing rates at 8.5%, the consumer price index this last month. I mean, this is the highest inflation we've seen in 40 years. And a lot of this has been driven by a supply demand imbalance and also just the really excessive consumption that we've seen in the US, but it impacts the most vulnerable of our population. So it's concerning. I think next I would say the shortage of chips has been, really, one of the most stressful parts of the supply chain disruption, because chips go into everything we own, from our cell phones, our computers, to automobiles, washing machines. And that's problematic. I mean, it's going to take a couple of years for that to stabilize. Certainly it's exciting. We're starting to see more production of chips in Texas, but, these are new investments. It takes a couple of years for a plant to be up and running. I think next I'd look at energy transition. I mean, we're transitioning to net zero, right, in the next 20 years or so. And we're doing this in the middle of not only a pandemic, but now the Russian situation in Ukraine, which has been impacting the energy markets, especially in Europe, where they're just seeing record high price points. And then I guess I'd end with, and this isn't so much as a result of supply chain disruption, but a factor is kind of severe weather and political unrest has really driven a lot of unpredictability in supply chains. Where I remain most concerned right now moving forward is food security in Africa and the Middle East as a result of the supply chain disruption coming out of wheat and corn coming out of Ukraine and Russia, which these particular regions are heavily dependent.
Yeah, that is something to be concerned about for sure. Also, broadly speaking, do you see production and supply chain issues easing soon and more of a return to what Americans are used to?
Well, certainly consumers cannot continue spending at the rate they've been going. It's unsustainable. I mean, you factor in that a lot of folks got these stimulus checks. They were working from home. They didn't have to spend money on gas. They didn't have to spend money on vacations. They may not have been going to the gym. But so you're going to see spending normalize, and you'll see eventually consumers pivot more towards a balance between services and goods. And I would factor in inflation. The price at the pump and the price at the grocery store is going to impact consumer spending habits. People are going to really have to prioritize their spending when you're spending $100 to fill up your car each week.
Yeah. The price of pop, huh?
Right.
Any changes you see happening based on lessons learned, Margaret?
Oh, there's so many. We need to get back to the basics and apply a classic risk mitigation strategy into diversification of suppliers, manufacturing facilities, and ports of entry into the US. And that needs to be driven, some of that, by incentives for nearshoring and onshoring. And finally, we've just absolutely got to invest into a digital and sustainable future.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. This has been super informative, Margaret, but let's go ahead and wrap this interview up. But know that it was a pleasure discussing this very timely topic, and that we sure would like to have you back for an update in about 6 months or so and see where we are then.
I would love to. A lot could happen between now and then.
Sure, absolutely. That, like, look what's happened in the last 6 months.
Yeah,
So,
who would have known?
right? So again, let me talk about the Supply Chain Forum. So to register for the upcoming Supply Chain Forum that Margaret will be moderating, visit the events page at allianceportregion.com. As always, we are most grateful for our audience. Please like and share this recording with colleagues. And for more industry news, videos, webinars, and podcasts, visit bicmagazine.com. And remember, folks, it's what we do together that counts.